Tonight on Renovation Rescue, Daryl and his family lived out in the beautiful countryside, a place of stunning natural beauty and wonder. But it came at a price. Unfortunately, they got forcibly evicted from their homes and are now living in a cave attached to a ravine. What's it like living down here in a ravine?
Horrible. It's dark and dingy and scary. When we moved here, there was hardly anywhere to go. They just left us here, and it's pretty bad. Oh, and there are these weird corridors that lead off to who knows where. And there seems to be a spider infestation.
So what are you looking for in terms of a new home?
Oh, just somewhere nice to call home, where we can focus on our lives and do our jobs. Like Uncle Bob and Auntie Barbara. He's a blacksmith and she's a librarian. They need somewhere to live and work.
Coming up after the break, we completely transform this disgusting spider-infested mineshaft into a wonderful subterranean village.
Hi everybody, welcome back to another episode of Minecraft The Journey with me, BugmanCX. Here we are in Minecraft Beta 1.9 pre-release, and behind me are all of the villagers which we kind of abducted from one of the nearby villages, and I thought it was not a very good idea to keep them here in a little hole, so I got some help from a renovation show, as you might have seen from the intro of this episode, and they've helped me transform this area into a wonderful new village deep here underground in the ravine. So I'm excited to let all of these villagers out to explore their new home. And by the way, don't be too concerned about the fact that they all look like farmers. We're just in multiplayer mode to record this, and right now that's how they all show up. But I'm just about ready to release the wall and let them all in for the first time. They look so excited for this. Okay, I've got a little toggle switch down here, so let's go. Off you go, little villagers, explore your new home. Hopefully you don't find anything that's going to kill you. Now this is just a little replica village that I made here underground after I dug out this area. You can see we have a church, we have a library here, we also have one of these little mud huts and a farm. We've got the blacksmith over here and the village well. We don't have a butcher, I'm afraid. You don't have anywhere to work, but I might build one over here at a later date. But at the moment, the entire section down here is completely isolated. There's no way for anything to get in or for any of these. Hey! You're already destroying the place. For any of these to... Why are there two butchers? Why are there two butchers? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There are supposed to be 5 of you. That's a little strange. I did actually notice, though, when I was transporting the villagers from the village originally, that just due to some weird quirkiness with the game, when I would reload the chunks, sometimes the villagers would duplicate, and I think that's what we've seen here. I don't know really what causes that, but apparently we have twin butchers. I'm not complaining. Anyway, to get back onto the topic of today, we have quite a bit to get through today. There are some new features that we're going to be exploring shortly, but before we explore those new features, I want to go back and explore an old one, and it has to do with villages in Beta 1.8 and some of the issues Notch was originally dealing with when he was developing the code for the original towns. When Notch was developing the town code for Beta 1.8, he was wrestling with the idea of how to indicate the edges of towns. In the original vision, villages would be able to be modified by the player, which means they'd grow in size and shape. But how do you show these boundaries visually? Do you even need to? Notch tried implementing town borders, but he wasn't very happy with the way it was working out. I can't think of a way to clearly show the edges of a town. I tried doing a Civ-like culture border thing, but it sucks. If we take a look inside of the terrain.png texture file, we can see that there are 2 new white textures that have been added to the bottom row of the grid. These are leftovers from Notch's attempt to add the borders. There are 2 distinct textures here. One is a straight edge and the other one is definitely a corner. They're also monochrome, which was a common way to implement textures in Minecraft back then, when there needed to be a consistent base texture which varied in colour from biome to biome.
A tint is applied to the monochrome texture during the in-game render depending on the biome for that block location. So we can probably assume that the same thing's going on here. The color of the border would inherit the color of the block tint. But that comes with all sorts of problems. These town borders are exploding my head. Nothing feels right. Different grass works, but only in towns with grass. And he's right, since the tinting effect only applies to a few special blocks. If the town's in a desert, how do you show the border on a sand block which doesn't have tinting? Players suggested ideas, but Notch said, I can't do terrain stuff like walls, as players can alter the towns and still need to know where the border is. And so ultimately, he gave up. I've spent a day and a half trying to make the town borders look good, and I'm getting very sick of it. But when Beta 1.8 was launched, these border textures remained in the terrain.png file unused. So let's imagine what they could have looked like if they were actually used within the game. For this experiment, I've chosen this village here. It's just a random one in a creative world, and I want to use this to imagine what these borders might have looked like if Notch had actually implemented them in the way that he was describing in his tweets, and using the leftover textures, of course, to do it. So let's imagine that there's a border of the village out here somewhere. It's probably going to be further back in reality, but let's say it's around about here, and that there's a border line that runs along here and then around the edge of the village, wraps around this way somehow, and that tells you where the edge of the village is. Now, if we were to apply Notch's textures into the game, there would be a double line sort of texture running along here somewhere. So let's do exactly that and see what it looks like. And this is what it could have looked like. If you take Notch's border texture and apply it over the top of a grass block and apply the correct biome tinting, this is what it would look like for this particular biome, which is just a regular plains biome. As you can see, we have the edge of the village over here, and then a corner over here, and then another edge running over this way, all the way up here until we find another corner, and then it runs off in that direction as well. So this is just an interpretation of my own based on what I think Notch was working on at the time and what I think it might have looked like during his development, but I can't be certain. So if you look up from the sky, you can also see what it could have looked like. I imagine it was probably going to be a lot further out, and this is quite up close, but it doesn't matter. It does give you some kind of idea about what it might have looked like. And I do agree, it doesn't really look that good. While we're on the topic of disused textures, let's take a look at a couple of others that made their way into the game's files, but never made it into the game itself. Along with the village border textures in Beta 1.8, there was another mystery texture added which resembled small footprints. There are 3 in the texture, 2 walking forwards and then 1 at an angle. We can't be sure if these are footprints, but they do look a little bit like it. They look like small boot prints rather than big blocky footprints that you might expect from the player's blocky feet. We can't be sure what their exact purpose was, but perhaps it was intended when mobs like villagers wandered around, they'd leave a small trail of footprints behind them which slowly disappeared after a while. Or maybe they were intended for the players. Who knows? I've retextured some blocks to see what it might have looked like if the texture was applied to these blocks, but you'll have to use your imagination a bit because, like I said, we don't really know what these textures were for or how they might have been applied in the game. But here we've got some grass, stone, sand, stone bricks, clay, and some snow. But what's interesting about these footprints is that in Beta 1.5, yeah, we're going back a little way here, there was another footprint texture added to the game which was also unused. This one was a separate texture file and it resembled a big square footprint, something that could definitely have been left behind by the player. It's rumoured that this was intended to be used in the snow, so that you'd leave a footprint behind in snow layers, but again, we can't really be certain. Once again, I've mocked up what this texture could have looked like just on top of a snow block here, but the texture itself seems pretty dark. So here's what it looks like when the opacity is lifted to about 50%, and probably more resembles what it was going to look like in-game. Back in the base now, and if we head down here to the void hole, you can see that I've started to make some changes down here. It's not quite finished yet, but the idea is that I wanted this space to be a bit more open so that you can come down here and explore the void hole from up above or from down below. And you'll notice as well that if you do go down below, we get to experiment with the void fog a fair bit. In fact, if I come over to this side, you'll see that it kicks in rather significantly like that. We get quite a bit of void fog, and if you move in and out of this area, you can see it kicking in fully.
I've also created this glass wall over here. I'm not entirely satisfied with it. I'm not sure what direction I'm going with it, but I wanted to incorporate the lava visually somehow. But right now it looks like a bit more of an eyesore, so I'm open to suggestions on how we can incorporate this better. But right now it does actually have a walkway over the top here, so you can come up here and have a look over the void hole and explore it that way if you want to. Now, I didn't come over here to talk about void holes. I came over here to talk about mushrooms because I've heard some rumblings that there's actually a new biome related to mushrooms. And you might remember that it's possible to grow large mushrooms. We need a proper space. They need a bit of space to grow. So let's try one right here. You can grow large mushrooms by bone mealing a regular mushroom and getting a huge one like this. And I'm very keen to see what this new biome might have to offer. Before heading out on my expedition, I thought I would load up my world seed here in Amidst because Amidst gives us a great view of all of the biome distribution throughout our world seed. Down the bottom here, you can see I've got world spawn, and that is in a swampland, unfortunately, but that's how it is ever since the biomes got redistributed. And up here, where my player icon is, or where this Steve head is where my player is currently located in the world, and that is in the ravine base right now. Down here is the village where we transported majority of the villagers from the last episode, and then over this way in this desert is where we took the librarian from when we had to ship it across half the world here. As you can see, off to the east after the desert here are a series of islands, and then a little bit further out in the ocean, we see this mysterious new island biome, and I'm really keen to go out and explore this and see what it's got to offer. Now, what's interesting about this new biome is that if we scroll out, you can see that there are quite a few of them spread out around the world, but they're all in the oceans, and that's because this biome usually appears as just an island, but it is possible to find them connected to the mainland in some cases. There's one right here, way down here. This is probably very far away. And so here we can see this is technically an island, but it's connected to other areas of land. So now that we know where to go, I'm going to head off to that village and then head out and see if we can discover this new island. One quick nether journey later, and we've wound up here at the desert village, and I'm keen to head off and see if we can find this funky new island all the way off in that direction somewhere. But before we do, I bought a new old GPS from eBay, and I'm keen to just see if it works because it might help us navigate our way there. So let me just program in the destination, and let's bring it up. Cool. Now, I should be able to use this to navigate my way there, and it should update itself as we go, so I'm just going to casually make my way over to the new islands, and hopefully it'll update, and we can see how we go. Well, that was pretty successful, but we're about halfway now, and I thought I'd stop for a little bit of a lunch break on this island before we head over the main stretch of ocean to get to this new island. And by the way, I love these islands in the middle of the ocean in Minecraft. They're just such cool places to build your base.
Hey!
Huh? What was that?
Over here.
Oh, hey Cal, what's up?
Are you headed over to that island?
What, the one over the ocean to the east? Yeah, I heard about it, and I thought I'd go check it out.
Do not go to that island. I'm warning you. It's cursed.
Cursed? What do you mean cursed?
Yes, cursed. All the indigenous life has been infected. The entire island is under quarantine.
What, like some kind of disease?
Don't ask any more questions. You have been warned. Do not go over there.
Wait, what's happening to your eyes?
Oh no, I'm infected. This is how it all begins. Oh, all right. Well, I'm just gonna leave you with that, okay? Good luck. Oh, quarantined, eh? That's something to think about.
Well, I've been thinking about this long and hard, and no matter what some stupid old cow says, you only live once, right? So let's take a risk. Let's go out and explore this island. I'm going to jump down here and get in my boat. Oh, but of course, before we do, I need to turn on my trusty new GPS, right? Aha, I love this thing. All right, let's hop in the boat and boats in Minecraft. Let's head out this way, and hopefully in not too far, we can find this new amazing island. Well, we should be coming up onto it any moment now, and I think, yes, there it is. Look at that. There's a giant mushroom up there on the top of the island. Let's get in a little bit closer. I'm going to switch off the GPS now because I don't need it anymore. I'm looking forward to this. So this is the new mushroom island. And maybe that crazy old cow was right because there seem to be some pretty weird inhabitants here. Anyway, let's berth up here to the edge of the island and hop out of the boat and have a look at what we've got going on. Well, as we know, this new biome is always going to form as an island, and it's actually made up of two biomes. They both look exactly the same though, basically. One is the Mushroom Island, which is the central part of the island here, and the second biome is the Mushroom Island Shore, which surrounds the edge of the island. Ignoring the local inhabitants for a bit, the first thing that's quite obvious here is that this Mushroom Island is populated by these giant mushroom variations, the red one and the brown one. And did you know that these mushrooms are actually based off of real-world mushroom types? The red mushroom is based off of a mushroom called the fly amanita, and it's a toxic red mushroom with a few psychedelic effects. The brown mushroom is based off of the penny bun. When Jeb was asked about whether we should change these mushrooms because they were potentially poisonous, he said, "I agree about the fly mushroom. I think Notch added it because it looks cool. The brown mushroom is a penny bun and definitely edible." As you can see, the entire surface of this island is covered by this funky purple dirt. And if you look closely, you can see that it's emitting some particles as well. This new block is actually mycelium. But what exactly is a mycelium? Well, as mushrooms and fungus grow, they spread out a huge network of tiny interconnected fibers called hyphae, and this mass of fibers is called the mycelium, and it can spread considerably far, and often it's all just part of the same organism. Normally it's all buried underground or inside of a log or a tree stump or something, and connecting the entire fungus organism together, and it's how the mushroom digests and breaks down the organic matter. The parts of the mushrooms we usually see on the surface are for reproduction, so if all of this material beneath us is the massive mycelium network digesting organic matter, and these giant mushrooms up here are all for reproduction, then this entire island is just trying to kill me and then reproduce around me. Yikes. So what that means for the Mushroom Island is that these blocks are still dirt blocks, or they were, but they've become part of the overall mycelium that's growing within the island itself. If you harvest these blocks, you get a regular dirt block back. There's currently no way to obtain this as mycelium directly. And just like real mycelium, it grows. If there are any normal dirt blocks nearby, then it will spread to them and convert them. But even if you could consider these dirt blocks, they don't behave like it. We already saw that they have a weird particle effect coming out of them. You can't till them like normal soil, and you can't plant normal plants on them, although you can plant mushrooms, of course. So if you already have mycelium, how do you get rid of it? Well, I want to try a couple of experiments. First, we know it's possible to dig up the mycelium, and you can probably place back down some dirt blocks right where these were, but as we've also seen, the mycelium will just spread, and it'll be a race against the clock to see who can win that battle, and I don't like your chances. The other experiment we can try is we could cover up some mycelium blocks. So if we just cover these up here over in the corner, and then if we come over and dig these up later on, I want to see what happens. I want to see if the blocks underneath have converted back to regular dirt, or if they stay as mycelium. The other thing we can do, which is similar to this, is try a water bucket. So if I place a water bucket down here, eventually I'm thinking what might happen is that these blocks underneath might convert back to dirt. But again, we're going to have to wait a little while and see what happens. So we're going to come back to these two experiments in a little while. There are a couple of other interesting properties about this island worth mentioning. For the first one, I'm going to jump over into a creative copy of this world that I do have here just for experimentation and other reasons, and that has to do with grass. Because over in this biome, if you do have access to grass, and obviously the reason that I've had to do this here in a creative world is because we're hundreds and hundreds of blocks away from any kind of grass, and so I wasn't going to let some grass grow from one of those neighboring islands all the way over here. So just for the purposes of this experiment, let's have a look at grass in this biome. Wow, check out that color. That is one vibrant patch of green grass, and in fact this is the brightest, greenest grass you'll get ever since they overhauled the colors of grass from classic. It's not quite as bright green as classic grass, but it is very green. Another interesting observation is that I've spent a good few nights here now while we've just been exploring the island and discovering all of the properties, and one of those properties is this. Notice how there are no mobs spawning, even though there should be? So it looks like one of the unique properties of this particular biome is that it doesn't allow hostile mobs to spawn. And that's amazing. That's great for your mining, for your base work, for just about anything. So might have to take advantage of that at some point in the future. And so last but not least, I think we should go off and have a look at this brand new mob, the mushroom. But where have they all gone? There's one down there and I saw one up there on that mushroom. In fact, if we check the edges of the island, I think most of them have swum off into nowhere. Yeah, there's a ton of them over here and I saw loads more of them off in that direction as well. Not really sure why they prefer to swim away from the island. Well, let's have a look at this one here, one of the last ones left on the island. The mushroom is a new mob for beta 1.9, and it only spawns here on the Mushroom Island. And it looks like a cow, it sounds like a cow, but it's red, and it's got black eyes, and mushrooms growing out of its back and head. Strange. For the adventure update, Notch and Jeb worked on some different areas. Notch said he was working on exploration stuff, while Jeb was busy working on some nether stuff. So we can gather from this that Notch was responsible for creating the Mushroom Island and the mushrooms. A few hours after he tweeted that, Notch sent out a new picture on Twitter. This picture shows the new mob and revealed the mycelium textures for the first time as well. And while we know it now as the mushroom, I don't think this was its original name because the texture file for this mob is simply called redcow.png. However, in the game's region files, they're called mushroom cow. So maybe the name came later, or came from the dozens of people calling it mushroom in their replies on Twitter and Reddit. Not much is known about the origins of the mushrooms as mobs, but here's my theory. Given that we know about the spread of the mycelium and how these blocks are giving off some very strange particles, we could assume that in terms of the game's lore, these used to be ordinary cows that have been corrupted by mushrooms. In fact, when Notch first posted these, the community said how much it reminded them of the corruption from Terraria. And I think there's some truth in this, because if you take a pair of shears and shear a mushroom, you can turn it back into a regular cow. Notch mentioned this on Twitter as well, and this was the first time he'd used the name mushroom officially. Oh wow, it's a regular party zone down here. What's so good about this little spot? Well, before we wrap up today's episode, I've got a couple more experiments that I want to do on these mushrooms. The first one involves my trusty sword. I want to know how close these things are to actual cows, so if I head over to, say, you, and just give you a little tap like that, what do we get? We got some leather and we got some raw beef, so that is pretty much the same drop as a regular cow, so I'm going to go with that. I think you're probably just regular cows. The second experiment is a bit of milking. I want to know what happens if we milk a mushroom. Do we get milk? I'm right-clicking. I'm not getting anything. But, oh, got a bucket of water. That's not what we wanted. But these things are a little bit strange. So what happens if we do it with some bowls? You know, got to try anything. Oh, what did we get? Mushroom stew. It makes sense. Kind of gross, but you're basically a walking food factory. In fact, that's pretty neat. If you were to take one of these home and put it in your base, you'd have an endless supply of mushroom stew. That's pretty incredible. In fact, I'm quite hungry now, so I'm just going to eat that up. Ah, delicious. And I did notice that it consumed all of the 4 bowls that I had in my inventory and left me with just 1. So thanks, game. Whoa. Thank you, Mushroom. Well, that ought to about do it for today, and I want to say thank you for watching, and as always, a huge special thank you to my amazing patrons for supporting me. If you want to join my Discord, there are links to that down below, there are links to Patreon and all of the other things down there as well, so I hope to see you there. Until the next episode, this has been BugmanCX. You've been watching Minecraft: The Journey. Goodbye.